Black Talk Radio.
It's the day before Election Day, and Kamala Harris is getting a little bit of negative news. If she had hoped to avoid any kind of controversy or to persuade any of the voters who are on the fringes of voting for her or staying at home, she didn't help herself by declining to answer reporters' questions about how she voted on a California proposition that would have turned misdemeanors into felonies, which would also result in more prison time. And so this is just Kamala confirming who she's always been. I have followed this woman when she was the California Attorney General. She wasn't on my radar as a district attorney, but once she became the Attorney General of California, billed herself as the top cop of California, and we, through New Abolitionist Radio podcast, began to examine her record, her office stances on some of the issues related to prison slavery in California, and she did not have a favorable record. I would classify her as a pro-slavery candidate, totally in support of the prison industrial complex, whether we're talking about locking up U.S. citizens or migrants into the country. Kamala Harris, like Donald Trump, will be a friend to the private prison industry. So let's take a look at some of the details of this article. Let me just pull it up right quick. So CNN and multiple other outlets are reporting Vice President Kamala Harris on Sunday declined to say how she voted on Proposition 36, a California ballot initiative that would allow for increased sentencing for people convicted of retail theft or drug crimes. Kamala Harris, this is her, a quote from her: "I'm not going to talk about the vote on that because honestly, it's the Sunday before the election and I don't intend to create an endorsement one way or another around it," she told reporters in Detroit when asked about the proposition. So this shows her weak leadership, and she's done this in the past, and I'll bring up some of her past record. But why would you not reveal or endorse or use your platform to endorse an initiative that has to do with criminal justice reform, or the unraveling, in this case, of criminal justice reforms? When they passed criminal justice reform, the voters in California, Kamala was tight-lipped then, and because she tries to have her foot in the right-wing camp, but then try to appear as if she's a progressive or like a left-wing candidate, and you know, that just doesn't work. You can't do that. And this just shows who she is, a calculating political actor who is more interested, in my opinion, of attracting the right-wing votes of Republicans, whether they label themselves as conservatives or evangelicals or whatever. She is more interested in riding out there with Liz Cheney, speak in glowing terms of Dick Cheney, those type of Republicans. In terms of abolitionists like myself, people who call themselves criminal justice reformers, she is not a friend. She's been an enemy on these issues. And so for a person to say, "Oh, I'm not going to endorse the proposition one way or the other," she's only doing that is because if she came out against it, then she appears weak on crime. If she comes out for it, then she's just really confirming who she really is. She's never really been for criminal justice reform. That's what the records say. This is not me saying it. That's what the records say. So we all know Harris is a former California Attorney General and San Francisco district attorney, and she was speaking about casting her vote, saying, "I actually just filled out my mail-in ballot and sent it to California." So I think it's just weak for her not to speak on an important ballot initiative and to use this lame excuse of, I don't want to endorse it, I don't want to persuade the vote. Oh, but you can, take definite stances on other issues that come up, like, for example, the Ukraine war. You want to pledge, continued support for Zelensky in that losing battle over there in Ukraine, which is using up, a lot of our resources. You are very clear. So again, this is Kamala Harris playing in our faces. And when I say our faces, I'm specifically talking to my community, the Black community. All right, this woman plays in our faces, and the Democrats want to portray Trump. And it's not that it's inaccurate to say that he's against criminal justice reform, although he did sign the First Step Act into law, which let out a lot of people. But in terms of his rhetoric, he's very tough on crime and in seeking the endorsements of these police, and says things that encourage police brutality. But Kamala isn't known for prosecuting any cops for police brutality. So anyway, let's talk more about this proposition that she refused. And I'm willing to bet you a dime to a dollar that Kamala voted for Prop 36. Proposition 36 would increase the punishment of certain theft and drug crimes by recategorizing them as felonies rather than misdemeanors. It would also require courts to warn people who sell illegal substances that they could be charged with murder. Again, this is a right-wing initiative. Usually we hear Republicans talking about these sort of things, saying they could be charged with murder if the substance kills someone. So my thoughts on that is, if an adult decides to make a purchase wherever they purchase from and ingest something and knowing it could be dangerous, then that's on them. This is not murder. This isn't intentional murder. You know, you might argue involuntary manslaughter, but again, this is I think that decriminalizing all drugs would be the proper way to go. So anyway, it goes on to say the measure would change parts of Proposition 47, a controversial initiative approved by California voters in 2014 to reduce overcrowding in jails by reducing punishments for some crimes. Backers of Proposition 36 include district attorneys, Republican lawmakers, and big chain stores such as Walmart, which uses profits from the use of prison slave labor, and that have been lashing out against a COVID-era rise in shoplifting that subsided last year. All right, so a lot of people out there struggling, couldn't make any money during COVID. Big retail chains, though, they made plenty. Many of them were charged with face allegations of price gouging and what have you. So, you know, that has subsided. We don't see all of that shoplifting during a time when people were desperate and our economy was on the brink of collapsing. But they still want to lock up more people, though. All right, so but it has also had support from a handful of Democratic mayors, including San Francisco's London Dredd, I think that's his name, who is facing a tough race. Now let's talk about the history, some of her history, because it just mentioned Proposition 47. So when Kamala Harris, and I did some research, searched 3 sites. When Kamala Harris served as California's Attorney General, she faced criticism for her office's stance on overcrowded prisons, particularly after a 2011 U.S. Supreme Court ruling. This is Supreme Court found that California prison conditions unconstitutional due to overcrowding. Harris' office initially argued against reducing the prison population, partially because the state relied on, what's that? Slave labor, although it says inmate labor, for essential programs such as firefighting. In 2014, her office resisted the early release of nonviolent offenders, arguing that it would impact labor programs. Again, New Abolitionist Radio, we've been telling people while this was happening that this woman is pro-slavery. She's a modern-day slaver. She's not a progressive. She is not on the side of the so-called Black Lives Matter movement or any kind of justice advocacy movement. Certainly not in California, right? And so even though her office resisted the early release of nonviolent offenders, arguing it would impact their quote-unquote labor programs, a stance that Harris later said she was unaware of and found shocking once she learned of it. Now, do y'all really think that somebody who is the head of the office, the head person in charge, is not going to get notes on the different cases that her court is arguing, especially such important cases as this, where your prisons have been ruled cruel and unusual by a right-wing Supreme Court? Okay, and to say that she was unaware of, she's a liar. We got 2 liars as the leading candidates for president. So glad I voted for Jill Stein, but let me stay on topic here. So those sources came from the Washington Examiner and the Marshall Project. Now, Harris took a generally neutral stance. She's doing the same thing she's doing now by not revealing how she voted on Prop 36, right, which they want to change Prop 47, which we just got through talking about. Harris took a generally neutral stance on larger criminal justice reform issues, often citing the responsibility of the Attorney General to represent the state's interests rather than personal views. For example, she remained publicly neutral on Proposition 47, which reclassifies certain nonviolent crimes as misdemeanors, despite it being a permanent topic in criminal justice reform at the time. Her choice to remain on the sidelines in these debates led some critics to view her approach as cautious or politically calculated. Again, she is more interested in getting the cop vote, the tough on crime vote. This is who this woman is, right? This is who she's always been. And so that is why she is not answering this question and giving this BS answer about, I don't want to endorse the proposition one way or the other. Then what do we need you for? Why would you call yourself a leader if you can't take a public position on a public law or a public ballot initiative? These people be playing in your faces. And do not be surprised if Kamala, the top cop, Harris, becomes the POTUS, that we don't see some reforms. Hell, they might unravel Trump's First Step Act. Who knows? Who knows? And people want to talk about Trump. And this is not a defense of Trump, because I voted for Jill Stein. My red line is genocide. People who know me know that. But they might try to undo Trump's First Step reform legislation. Do that. And they try to talk about Trump and Project 2025. Well, it might be awfully funny that a lot of those people associated with that are the Cheneys and other right-wing Republicans. that she is out there pandering, putting emphasis on acquiring their votes and not putting an emphasis on the votes of oppressed communities. But if she becomes president and all this plays out, don't act like you shocked. Don't act like you shocked, because I'm telling you now. All right, this has been Scotty. Please support the production of this podcast as well as other podcasts on blacktalkradionetwork.com. You can go there and make a donation today, or you can donate through whatever platform you're finding this content being distributed on. With that said, peace and blessings to all.